That's a pretty big mistake, and I don't think Mark is reacting enough to just how capped his opponent's range is in that spot. Mark has missed the mark on this river. Ladies and gents, welcome back to Carrot Corner. We have two exciting pieces of news to share with you right now. Firstly, the Carrot Poker School, the academic-style, mega-long course on no-limit hold'em cash games is available for purchase on carrotcorner.com. If you have been eagerly awaiting the launch of this course, you don't have to wait any longer. Click the link in the description and head over there to grab the course today. In other news, the bloodbath is resuming. It's the return of brutal feedback, and in today's episode entitled Missing the Mark, my friend and student Mark, who's a really good guy, has sent over a session for us to get our teeth into. Even though we like Mark, it's still our duty on brutal feedback to rip the student's game to pieces, so we're going to be finding out where Mark's leaks, mistakes, and blunders reside in his game and giving him some brutal feedback. Let's get started. So this is a cash game session from Paddy Power Poker. Don't think I've ever reviewed a video on this site before. We have deuces, and we decide to call a 3-bet. I think this is a very break-even kind of play. There's not a lot to it. Whether you open deuces or not in the hijack is actually up to you. It should be microscopically losing or something, in theory, but you can open this on some tables depending on what's going on. Horrendous flop for our hand, but an amazing flop for our range. This is such a unique teaching point in No Limit Hold'em where you actually get a board that your range is normally in love with, but this time it kind of hates it. When you see that pattern of really strong range, really bad hand, you want to be bluffing. Not necessarily right away, but you want to be bluffing at some point. So what we probably don't want to see Mark do here is check all the way to the river, though at least deuces does have some degree of showdown value against things like ace king, ace queen. If you get here with nothing, you definitely have to bluff. I think turning the deuces into a bluff at this point is also totally fine, and by betting here, what you're going to be doing is getting some useful fold equity and setting up some ostensible situations in the future where you can actually bluff villain off of better hands. When the turn comes to 8 of clubs, this is also not a bad card for your range at all. It's a bit of an equalizer. What a flush card tends to do is neutralize the rank or the importance of the rank of the board, making this a little bit less good for us than it was on the flop. However, this is still fine, and I think you can do some bluffing with an array of different hands here if checked to. As it is, villain goes ahead and leads for half pot, and we just clearly have a fold. I think this is one of the situations where villain's range will be incredibly strong. He'll just be under bluffing this situation, and there's just no reason to suspect that there's any kind of funny business going on there because our opponent has already filtered their range. I was really dreading Mark doing something there that wasn't fold because I was actually going to have to be horrific to him. I was going to have to be really evil. But fortunately, he makes the right play on this occasion. On to the next spot. Pocket fours now in the hijack. Villain 3-bets again here. Again, it's a very similar situation. If you open fours here, actually we are the cutoff. This player's sitting out. This is very confusing for me. I'm guessing we're calling. Looks like it. Okay. You don't always have to defend a pocket pair to a 3-bet, guys. That is a break-even thing. Mark, if you always defend here, don't know why I'm speaking like in second person to the student, but why not? I've started the sentence now. If you do this, Mark, every single time, like there's some kind of long-term repercussion where you become a station against 3-bets. These are meant to be break-even if villain is constructing well. If you're a bit deeper, if the 3-bet's a bit smaller, the player's a bit terrible, you can make these defends. Otherwise, I wouldn't worry too much about it, and I would mix fold in here too. Villain decides to check the flop and we check behind. I think Queen 9-3 is another one of these pretty good boards for our range. It's maybe not as good as the 9-8-7 that we saw previously, but it's going to be fairly decent. And the reason for this is that the queen is one of the more common broadways we're going to flat against the 3-bet here, and also the 9 is a set-making card. This isn't a board where villain is going to be doing amazingly, and so them building a checking range makes some sense here. When villain checks again on the turn, we have a decision to make. Is this hand going to benefit enough from fold equity for us to start betting? I could see this hand being a bit of a mixed bag of different reasons for betting, a bit of a hybrid we would call it in the Carrot Poker School. For instance, if we bet here and villain folds a hand like ace jack or ace king, they're undeniably folding a lot of equity. Not only are those hands drawing to an ace or a jack, they can also counterfeit us when a queen comes too. So these hands actually have more equity than normal when the board is paired. That's an interesting take. Betting to make those hands fold is not going to be enough of a reason on its own for betting here. However, if villain check calls with a hand like ace king of hearts, ace jack of hearts, well, we do have one of their outs, so that's kind of cool to reduce their equity by having the 4 of hearts, a card they would like to hit. And another thing that we could say here is it's not completely impossible that villain could fold a better hand than ours to a large bet here. If we go ahead and bet big here, possibly something like pocket 6s, pocket 7s, that can definitely 3-bet small blind versus cutoff, could find the muck. So I don't mind a bet here. I think it's a little bit creative, but it's fine. One thing I would think about is what range am I constructing here? Where's the bottom of my value range? For example, if you only really want to bet a hybrid hand like fours, some bluffs, and then not bet something like jacks or tens or eights ever, and just bet king queen plus or queen jack plus, I think you can just use a bigger sizing than this. Whereas if you do want to bet a little bit more mergy here and kind of say to villain, hey, I don't think you're protecting your range enough, let me protect my equity even though I'm not supposed to be able to all the time with a hand like jacks or tens or something like this, then we can use a smaller bet. I don't really mind this bet though. I think if villain's range is really weak here and really underprotected, this is a nice cleaning up equity bet that can also get called by a few worse hands, and I think if villain is playing a properly protected checking range, then this bet still has some merit. But yeah, I would really think about what kind of range you're building here before you choose your sizing. Villain goes ahead and folds, get one through. And that's the thing, that's the nice effect that can occur when you bet a hand like that. It's an incredibly vulnerable hand, as I said on that text, and if people are not punishing you by check raising enough, then you can go ahead and just make a bet that is mostly for protection. If someone is protecting their checking range, then you can't do that. You need a few other reasons to go into the mix as well. Okay, let's play a limped pot, I guess. Villain limps. I think you can definitely raise here. In fact, one of the things I would recommend that students do is look at the flop with your clairvoyant powers. If you guys concentrate enough here, you can actually see what the flop is going to be before you take your pre-flop action. That's the function of Paddy Power Poker. You just have to use psychic powers to see it. So Mark obviously tapped into that, saw the flop was going to contain a 6, and thought, you know what, I don't really need to blow my opponent out of the pot. Now I can see the flop's going to contain a 6. In reality, of course, we didn't see that. I just half paused the video. You can raise pre, is what I was going to say. Limp ranges from weaker players are going to be wildly underprotected. They're not going to be limp 3-betting you like they should be. If you're actually constructing a proper limping range in the small blind, you're supposed to be limp 3-betting someone at quite a high frequency, both as a bluff and for value with hands like big overpairs and such big cards. I don't think that's happening, and therefore we can be pretty crazy in position and we can really push a lot of fold equity throughout the combination of pre-flop and the flop here by raising pre. So I'd love to see a pre-flop raise here. I think it's actually really good against pool. As played, I think this hand makes a fairly okay bet for small sizing, but I would normally check. I would just throw this into my checking range. I don't really see a reason to bet a 6 with a bad kicker here. On the turn, the 3 of clubs comes. Villain is probably going to be bluffing a lot here. This time they check. Now, what you're going to see from humans is that they just don't really have anything here. So again, if you want to craft a 1/3 pot size bet to just say, you know what, my pair's a bit vulnerable, I'm going to deny some equity to you, I don't think you're going to punish me for getting overzealous here and betting the middle of my range a lot, then you can go ahead and bet here. Theoretically, it's probably mostly a check, though you can possibly just value bet at this point anyway. On the Jack River, if villain checks again here, I think you have a mandatory value bet, which he does. What we need to be aware of in this situation is that the configuration is extremely wide, meaning pre-flop ranges are incredibly weak, and that villain has taken an action all the way through the hand that has just capped their range tremendously. So when someone goes check, check, check to you in a spot where their range started off as way too many weak combos, your hand is going to be massively upgraded. So it doesn't really matter that your pair here is only the 3rd pair, nor does it matter that your kicker is only like the 5th kicker or whatever it can be with a 6. Villain will have a deuce, he will have a 3, he will have 5s, 4s, ace high, hands like this. So I'd like to see a bet of like half pot here. I think that would be fine. Definitely value bet the spot though, because you have about 90% equity, 80-90% equity, and with that much equity, you just have to bet. So you're going to win here, but you have to try and get value because your hand is so good. That's a pretty big mistake, and I don't think Mark is reacting enough to just how capped his opponent's range is in that spot. Mark has missed the mark on this river. Ace-9 of clubs, it goes open and call from cutoff. You can cold call here, you can probably fold, you can probably squeeze. If you think you have a skill edge in this game, you don't really want to fold. If you think under the gun is going to be like a weaker player that's really stationary to 3-bets, you just want to flat, and if you think there's a decent amount of fold equity, you probably want to squeeze. So all 3 options can be okay here depending on your table, but I think fold is a little bit too tight if you have a skill edge here. We do consider folding, then it looks like we're looking at squeezing. We don't give call a lot of love there, like we didn't hover over the call button at any point. I wonder if that's indicative that Mark needs to think more about calling in this spot, because that would be fine. But anyway, we squeeze it up, which is also fine. I have no issue with this, and we pick up a call. King 9-7, incredibly good board for our range. We have loads of the really good combos there, and the king is going to be a Broadway that by and large misses our opponent at quite a high frequency. I think c-betting small with range is a decent plan here. Because the pot's squeezed and not just merely 3-bet, you can probably go ahead and actually use quarter pot or something like that. There's not a lot of urgency in position at this SPR, stack to pot ratio, so you can just wait and put a little bit of money in now. put a lot in later. The thing is here that your opponent's range is relatively polarized between having a king or a set and then having something quite bad, although this board does offer a little bit more mergy stuff like ace jack of spades, jack 10, queen 10, etc. So I don't mind like half pot here, third pot or quarter pot. I think they're all fine, and I think doing a lot of betting is prudent in this spot with range because we have a large range advantage. Villain calls, we get the deuce of spades turn. This is a mandatory check. I would never ever be opening action here with the middle of our range, so I'd like to see a pretty, maybe not a hasty check, because we can like let our clock run down and make it look like we have a decision, but we definitely want to be checking. If villain checks this river, I think we just show down and hope he has eights. We just have a bit too much showdown value to start bluffing. Very easy check, yeah, just absolutely no reason. Very nicely played hand. Good job, my friend, and you've won that pot somehow. I wasn't expecting that, but we'll take it, let's go. This is actually a really cool hand. It looks boring in small pot and, you know, it's innocuous, but these spots really add up and they're quite fascinating. So we get another limp here, king queen 9 on the flop, and villain checks. This player is looking incredibly passive so far. We immediately gravitate towards the check button here, but here's the thing, we could have checked a hand like queen 9, jack 10, king 9 at some frequency, king x. We can have a bluffing range here. There's no reason why we can't be mixing some bluff with 10-3. And I don't think having the 3 is like that bad a thing, because I could imagine a lot of villains' folds here contain something like an 8 or a 7, a slightly higher card, maybe an ace. I think the 3 unblocks quite a lot of folds. I think it's fine to start betting this flop if you want to. And again, I'm not sure how well people protect their checking range in this spot, so I'm quite a fan of bet here, but I think you can also delay it and check for now and then maybe bet turn. I think that's fine. Bet's okay here for sure. I like it. You're going to want to craft some bluffs and they're going to be 10x, jack x. A bit more so with the backdoor. 10-3, by the way, is the kind of hand that's a bit too hopeless to want to raise pre, unless your opponent is just really overfolding. So while I would raise the 8-6, I probably wouldn't raise the 10-3 off. On the turn, I think this is a turn that's very, very bad for you. The 9 is going to be a card that's in your opponent's range way more than it's in yours. I think you need a heart here to bet if you're going to bet a gutter, but because we do have a heart, I think you can theoretically bet this again. I suspect against a weaker player that this may just be a mistake to bet, because this turn is so good for them, and I just get the feeling that this spot is going to be really underfolded, just based on the fact that really nothing changed to the naked eye. So if villain is called queen 7 here on the flop, that might be the kind of hand they're meant to fold to a big turn bet here. I'm not convinced that's happening from a guy that limp called the small blind on a texture like this. So I think this is an underfolded turn spot and one that we should probably just check back, but definitely we have a hand that's allowed to bet in theory, I think. We go for a check, which seems good. 7 rolls off in the river. Timing is important here, so he takes a bit of time. You'll note that time ticking down. 12, so yeah, he's taking a lot of time here to check. Now, they may be playing multiple tables, but weaker players generally aren't. I think I'm dissuaded here, like when somebody check calls a big bet on king queen 9, then the texture doesn't really change, and then they check the river after a 10-second think. I'm pretty sure this is going to be an overly protected checking range, and I think a lot of the hands that you would want to fold now just won't. So if villain has a hand like a queen, I just don't think it's going anywhere. A hand that may fold could be something like ace 10, but that probably just raises pre-flop. So I think this is a spot where when you really break it down and you think about the real range construction of your opponent here and couple that with the long check timing on the river, you just don't want to take this spot as a bluff. You just want to just pass it up and say, okay, you know, I took my shot at this. This is a weaker player on a texture that's not really... It's very static. It's not really going to be giving me a lot of fold equity. In some of these spots where you go bet, check, bet, you do have a lot of fold equity, but not really this kind of texture. Not really king, queen, 9, where most of the hands that call you on the flop are already very established pairs and pair plus draw and stuff like that. I think we give up river here. I mean, this is brutal feedback. You idiot! What are you doing, Mark? You idiot? You moron? Sorry, I forget to be brutal sometimes. I have to be a lot meaner. Mark, you're a shit guy. You really shouldn't have bet there. What a shit thing to do. Be ashamed of yourself. Is that better? Sometimes I get comments that are like, that wasn't brutal at all. You were being really sweet there, Pete. You were being lovely. Well, how's that for lovely? King, queen of spades, and we go ahead and raise it up in one of the positions. I can't tell what it is. Pretty sure this one is the hijack. Nobody's sitting out here. I'm used to playing Zoom where no one's allowed to sit out, so it's a little bit weird. This guy 3-bets. I think this is a bit too good to 4-bet. I think 4-bet's not ridiculous. It's not miles away from being a 4-bet bluff, but I think call is probably the main line here. I think 4-bet's okay. Going to be checking on a board that's massively good for our opponent's range. I'd imagine they're just going to bet small here with a lot of combos. This is quite a polarizing board for our range because, well, we have a few medium equity hands. We don't have many. Don't have a lot of jack X. We either have a king, or we have a set, or we have something quite bad like pocket 7s, pocket 9s, 10s, 8s, etc. So I think the small bet makes more sense here. I don't like the sizing from the opponent. This is like a kind of indicative thing that this guy just doesn't really understand what's going on. Like making a big bet here into a range that's quite polarized is just a bit silly. So this sizing is a no-no, but we're not here to tear apart this Podfartilo 1, strange name. We're not here to tear them apart, we're here to tear Mark apart, so let's do that. Anyway, easy call. You're not going to build any raises against this. You're out of your mind if you build a raising range against a large bet here. You just shrug, you call, you check, you see what develops. You don't get too happy, you don't get too sad. Villain tanks a bit. Again, I like to look for timing. Bets half pot, just call again. You're way up there. Villain can be value betting with a worse hand or similar hand. Weaker players will merge here. They'll bet ace jack, they'll bet queens, they'll bet king 10. Don't be dissuaded. Definitely don't jam, that's horrific. Because this is a paired board and now equities run quite far apart, which means that if you jam, you'll just get called by the value bets and not the bluffs, and you'll be in pretty bad shape. So easy call, check, river, cry. Especially cry now, although this may just save you your stack sometimes when you were beat already. Easy check fold now, I'm not going to bluff catch. This river with this hand against a weaker player when there's a triple Broadway out there, this is a horrific bluff catcher. You just don't want to be calling in spots where, I mean, villain may not jam here, I'm just assuming if they do jam. We don't want to be calling in spots where our hand is a bluff catcher and it's incredibly hard to bluff. Like, what does villain have to have done here to be getting here with bluffs? Potted queen jack on the flop or near potted, then gone ahead and bet turn again with second pair and then followed through on river, or equally ridiculous bet sevens twice and followed through on the river. That's what you'd have to do in GTO. That's not happening. This is one of the most underbluff spots in the entire universe. If you call here, you're literally setting your money on fire. Please fold. Good job. Go ahead and open up jacks here under the gun and get a call from the button and a squeeze from the big blind. This is a call and only a call. We do not want to be 4-betting in position with mediocre to good hands in this position. We want to be a lot more polarized, and I suspect on this site, which looks like it's full of weaker players, we just want to be 4-betting mainly for value here. Flop goes 3-way and we are doing nothing. This is the worst hand ever. It's blocking our opponent's bluffs, it's unblocking their value, it's drawing to only 2 outs. It has all of the attributes of a terrible hand. So just going to be checking and giving up in the spot. Looks like that's what we did. Somebody bets, we go ahead and fold. This sizing is also ridiculous, because if you imagine that like somebody has ace queen here sometimes, but usually people just have like 9s and 8s, why are you potting? The motto of today's video is don't use brain dead sizing, actually think. And I'm just gonna like, Mark isn't doing a whole lot wrong so far, so maybe I can just like start pummeling his opponents instead, and we can change the title to killing Mark's opponents, or Mark's opponents are dipshits, or something like that. I don't know. No offense guys if you're watching this, but yeah, you do not want to pot this situation. This is horrible. Horrible. Imagine you were playing a game where there were like 3 hands, an ace, a king, and a queen, and you had a king, and your opponent had either an ace or a queen. You wouldn't want to use pot sizing in that spot. Now I know you could have the nuts here, but it's a bit like that someone's either hit this flop really hard with something like ace queen or queens, or they just, or ace king, or they just haven't, in which case you just want to be going small. Sure, there's like a couple of combos of like flush draw plus gutter that this works okay against, but just ignore those. They're not a significant part of ranges. Usually someone either has a good hand or they have something terrible like 9s here. Just bet small. 5-3 of hearts, we're going to go multi-way. Lovely little hand to complete in the big blind here in a 3-way pot. Going to start with a check on this one, I would imagine. People bet too much here, I would say, 3-way. I don't think they understand that like when there's a combined enemy, they probably want to bet a little bit less often. So against half pot heads up, this would be an absurd fold. 3-way, I think it's still an absurd fold. With the backdoor hearts, the 5-out redraw, you know, you don't just have a lowly pair of 3s, you have 5 outs to 2 pair plus and a backdoor flush draw, and villain could just be betting way too wide. I think raise here is totally fine, and you do want to be raising some of these so-called hybrid hands. We refer to these a lot in grade 3 of the Carrot Poker School. Hands on the flop which want to raise because of a combination of folding out better, getting called by worse, and then getting equity denial. So in this spot, if villain folds ace 9, you know, excellent, he folds a bunch of outs, that's great. If villain calls with a hand like ace king, that's okay, we're in good shape there. If villain calls with a queen, that's still okay because we can get there and have a value element that comes from hitting trips or a flush later, or even 2 pair. And we can also just get villain to fold some better hands. So if this opponent is betting too many combos of 10, 9, 8, 7, 6s, ace 3, 4s, etc., they're going to be folding some better hands here too. So I really like raise actually. I think raise is the way to punish an overzealous c-bet strategy in this spot, but I think call is also okay. I think fold here is completely no, okay, I don't think it's completely out of the question. I was just gonna say, let's watch that again in slow motion. Let's watch this. Let's react to this in slow motion, guys. You ready? So let's skip forward just a tiny bit here. Face this flop bet again. Happy days. Gonna go ahead, mix, call, and raise. Maybe just raise exploitatively. Gonna continue. No. And look, you would have made a flush. What did I tell you? You would have made a flush. That's why you had to call. You should have known the flush was coming. You should have done that clairvoyant trick that I told you about on Paddy Poker that you can do. Disclaimer, you can't do that. You can't cheat on Paddy Poker any more easily than you can cheat on any other site, to my knowledge. Disclaimer, 2022. Legal coverage. Contact my lawyers. Whatever. Let's go. Another hand. These blind versus blind spots are coming thick and fast today. We have ace, king, 5 rainbow, and villain decides to check the flop. This is an ideal bluffing candidate as well at some frequency. You don't have to bluff here. I just don't get this sizing. I hate this sizing, Mark. What are you doing? What are we doing with this sizing? Like, what are we actually saying? Are we like, oh yeah, let's bet pocket 8s sometimes. Let's bet king 4. Why would you bet king 4? Why would you bet pocket 8s? Carrot Poker School, grade 1, lecture 8. Float betting the flop. Review that lecture, my guy. I know you've done this class, because when the Carrot Poker School was a live academy, I taught you in this class. So why have you done this? Why have you made this sizing? If you're building a betting range around good ace x plus, just bet big. It's the simplest strategy. It's the most forgiving strategy. It's easy. Why are you small betting here? There was no thought, there was no timing here, there was no real analyzing going on. It was just, if you look at the timing here, guys, it's just a case of like, I'm just gonna bet small. It's autopilot, sloppy, lazy. Don't do it. Think. Now I'm mad. Yeah, we missed the mark here. It's such an awful pun, isn't it? Okay, so to review this again, you're betting something like what? Ace 7 for value plus, ace 3, just bet big. When your value range isn't betting for any equity denial, it's not betting for thin value, it's just betting for thick value, the correct sizing is a large one. You will not see a solver use this sizing here, because the solver knows how to think. Small blind calls, and now we pick up the ideal turn card. I mean, barrel again is good. You can actually check here as well. The thing is that if you check, you still have all this equity. Yes, I know it feels like you want to bluff this hand, but never bluff a naked gutter without the flush draw. You actually want to bluff both at some frequency. So don't fall into the trap of being like, oh, I can bluff this all the time, but I'll never bet when I have like the jack 3 of hearts here. You should still bet sometimes with the jack 3 of hearts. You should bet more often with this. You can still check this. We're never checking this though, because look at the timing. Well, maybe we are. There's a little bit of thought there. Okay, mix. Just mix. It doesn't matter what you do. You can't really go wrong here. You can't make a mistake. What you'll find is that people, again, they'll fold like a 5 or an under pair here, which is fine. They'll also probably like station like king x and ace x in this spot. So okay to triple here for sure. This is a board where, yes, we do block busted clubs. So hand selection wise, we probably shouldn't be tripling in this spot. Like if you ask a solver, it may not mind this hand, but I think the jack of clubs is one of the more dicey ones. The queen is probably even dicier. Then again, you know, busted flush draws here are not a big deal because they come with pairs very often that are going to bluff catch anyway. And because we're not normally meant to bluff like every busted flush draw, villain will call with some busted flush draw plus pair hands here. So I actually don't think it's a big deal here what blockers we have club-wise. I think we can go ahead and just follow through in this spot if we want to. We are going to block quite a bit of folding range, so I suspect this one's probably a give up theoretically, but I don't think it's like a massive deal if we go ahead and bet here. Sizing is interesting, right? You block queen jack. How about just overbetting? If you think about your value range again, and I think a lesson for Mark that's going to come out of this session is thinking more about the value range and what sizing it actually wants to choose. If we had a hand like a set of 5s, ace 5, ace 10, queen jack, would you not just overbet this node? Like, would you really go this sizing? You can have this sizing in your toolkit, but see if all of your bluffs go into the sizing, and then when you've got queen jack, you remember to overbet, you're going to play like a buffoon. Do you want to play like a buffoon or do you want to play like a good player? Because the choice is yours, you choose. So I fear that this is going to be overbluffed now, because maybe not, it depends what we bluff on the turn, but I fear that this is going to be badly constructed in most people's game. Nothing personal to Mark, just a lot of people would badly construct here. Wait, it's brutal feedback. Mark, you idiot, look, you had ace 5, of course you shouldn't bluff. See? Nah, you don't want to be results oriented, that's not why it's a bad bluff. You know your opponent's not going to fold ace 5, right? That's not what you are trying to get fold equity from. I deliberately avoided using the word targeting there because I hate that word. You can 3-bet the queen 9 if you want to. No problem. More B vs B battles against Pirate Table. Why would you name yourself after the poker table? Like what? Like I know a table has something to do with poker, but is that really a cool name? 1 out of 10. 1 out of 10 for the name Pirate Table. Actually 0.5 out of 10. That's a shit name. Check on the flop. So here again, you want to craft a big bet because you're going to build your betting range around a decent king or like ace jack or something plus. So you don't really want to be betting small on this texture. I mean, you can. It's not as black and white as the ace king 4, where you definitely never want to bet a mediocre hand. But here again, the easiest way to play is just to pull out your strategy and use a large sizing. The idea is that you don't have a range advantage in the spot, but you will build a betting range that then gains a nut advantage, and you want to use a big sizing with that nut advantage when you're betting. On the turn, I would absolutely check. This is a fairly stable hand. It's not that vulnerable. I don't think you have a value bet or a bluff here, of course. On the river, after it goes check, 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 you might have a value bet though. This one is a bit less clear than the one before because the one before was a limped pot. Easy call, snap, don't even think. Good job, well played. What is he doing? Why is he bluffing ace high? What is he? He's just lost his mind. This is such a bad play. 0.5 out of 10 for the name, 0 out of 10 for the river bet. That's a total of 0.5 out of 20. That's a total of 2.5%, if my math serves me correctly. That's a fail, my friend. That is a hard fail. Last hand of the day, blind versus blind. We make the defend pre-flop and we flop a straight. Okay, this is another float bet spot, theme of the day. We are going to be using a big bet here as well, I think, because we have a massive nut advantage on this texture. We just have a lot more low cards as a concentration of our range. Things like 7s, 8s, 6-8, 6-4, 5s, 8-5 suited, 7-5 suited, 7-8 off are going to be way denser in our range than they are in that of our opponent. We're just going to be thriving here. So using the large bet with the big nut advantage is going to make a ton of sense. We talk about this a lot in grade 1 of the Carrot Poker School as well. How to choose your sizing, how to choose your strategy. I like a big bet. I think this hand is a pure bet. I would never slow play this one. I think it's just way too good and you're in position, which means that you cannot check raise on this node. If you can't check raise on this node, you may well just want to bet. Villain has a think, has a tank, and then folds. That's normal. It's going to be quite an underprotected spot for our opponent. That brings us to the end of another episode of Brutal Feedback, boys and girls. If you enjoyed it, you know what to do. Leave me a little comment and let me know. I really appreciate it. Also, if you can smash that like button and share the video with all of your friends on all of the social media platforms in the world that exist, that would be tremendous. You know what to do to take your game to the next level, right? If you like the way we teach here, check out the Carrot Poker School. It is live, it's dense, it's huge, and it's everything you need on poker cash game theory. See you all in the next video. Much love. Bye for now, guys.